Welcome to the second series of The Courage to Speak with me, Leonie, the podcast that asks, what does it take to have the courage to speak up and speak out in life? Having coached people in the art of communication for over 20 years, and from my own experience, I know that speaking with confidence is a skill that can be learnt and honed. It seems to me we're living in a time when it's harder than ever to speak out, particularly on certain subjects. I'll be talking to my guests about their relationship to speaking out and speaking up, looking at the journey this has taken them on from childhood to the present, the experiences they've had, both worst and best, hilarious and painful, and how over time they've managed to overcome their fears and have the courage to speak. My guest today is Gary Lineker. Gary had a prolific footballing career as a striker for England and clubs including Leicester City, Everton, Barcelona and Tottenham Hotspur. Gary's footballing prowess led him to become England's top goal scorer, winning 80 England caps, scoring 48 England goals, with memorable performances in international tournaments including the 1986 FIFA World Cup, where he won the Golden Boot. During his illustrious career, he was never shown a yellow or red card. Beyond football, Gary has become a prominent media personality, notably as a sports broadcaster for the BBC. He's recognised for his insightful analysis and affable demeanour as the longest-serving host of Match of the Day. For 8 years, Gary was team captain of the sports game show They Think It's All Over. In 2014, he set up Goalhanger Films, producing sports-based documentaries and Goalhanger podcasts covering history, politics, current affairs and sport, including his own podcast, The Rest is Football. He has also used his platform to speak out on various social and political issues, advocating for causes such as refugee rights, climate change awareness and equality in sports. His willingness to engage in discussions beyond the realm of football has earned him respect as a thought leader and influencer beyond the pitch. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me.
I'm particularly thrilled to talk to you on the subject of the courage to speak, given that you were recently dubbed the Mouth by The Guardian. What's
Big
it like?
Mouth, I think it was.
Big Mouth. Big Mouth. Did you? I mean, I don't believe you always were the mouth, as it were. So I'd like to start with what you were like as a child. Were you outgoing or inward?
I was very shy.
Were you really?
Yeah, really shy, even as in my early years as a football player. And I'm still relatively shy now in big groups of people. I don't necessarily feel that comfortable. I don't necessarily want to speak out on all issues. People say, oh, he's got a view on everything. And that's, I mean, everyone has a view on things. But I don't really speak out apart from things that matter to me. So I've kind of focused on various areas that I feel are important. You know, usually on about social justice.
Yeah.
And I like to see people being treated fairly.
Yeah.
And when I don't see that, that tends to irk me a little bit and motivate me to speak out. Climate change is something that I think is like a separate issue, but they're humanitarian issues really, because we've got to protect the future of our children and we're not doing that. So those two things are the main things I actually speak out.
Yeah, fair enough. But were you always like that? I mean, this sense of justice. So at school, when you saw someone being bullied, for example, did you rush in to help or?
I was too small.
You were too small.
I think I might have been bullied myself. I hadn't been good at football, but it saved me, I think. I was a very shy kid.
What were you like helping your dad on the fruit and veg stall?
Not very good, but it was a great motivation to be a footballer because that was far too much hard work for me. My dad used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, go and buy his produce from the wholesale market, set it up, sell it all day, and then come home and do his bookwork. And I thought, I need to find something else that's not quite so tough. So So I mean, I always wanted to be a footballer. I was always, or a cricketer at that stage. Either would have done. I never really thought I would be. Everything I did surprised me.
Did that help your confidence then, football? Was it something that you could then talk to people about?
I would say that would be fairly accurate, yes, because there was something I was obviously good at. I was stood out at the school, so I'd top scored loads of goals for the football team and scored loads of runs with the cricket team. So I think if you're really good at sport, you tend to have an easier life at school, and I think that was definitely the case.
Yeah, and I gather that you suffered racial abuse.
I didn't. I was slightly. I kind of misrepresented what I said because the way they clipped it.
Okay.
But you could describe it as that if I was a person of colour, which I'm not, obviously.
Yeah.
So, but I have a swarthy skin, and when I was young, I every day I was called the P word.
Right.
So I used to get that. So I was just explaining what it did it bother me? No, not at all.
Yeah.
But it gave me an understanding of what life could be.
Yeah.
And even it went on into football. I still some players would have called me that. But it was kind of a thing back then. It wasn't. Nobody thought of it as a racist slur like we would now. And obviously I'm not Asian anyway.
No.
Everywhere on social media they took it out. They nipped a little bit out of what I actually said completely. So when it went out on the piece, and then it was still fine, but it was just that people started to say, "Oh, he thinks he's black," and it was a bit absurd. But anyway.
And how did your parents feel about you becoming a footballer? Were they up for it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, when I was 11 years old, I took the 11 plus, which was still around back then.
Yeah.
And I passed it, and that meant I had a choice of schools, but we moved house to the county of Leicestershire rather than being in the city of Leicester, so there was only one grammar school in the county that I could go to.
Yeah.
But it was a rugby playing school, and my dad said we can't have that happen. He said we'll move back into town.
Right.
And I had to go and live in the interim period. I had to go and live with my grandparents for 9 months, which was actually quite good because my gran made great cake. So I mean, which seems a bit extreme just for a kid to go back to football, but he must have seen something. So they were very encouraging. My dad was a fruiterer. He'd drive the team around in the back of the van and stuff like that. Yeah.
And when you were with the team, you've said that there's no hierarchy in what position you play. Is that the case? Or is there sort of the person who's the bigger personality who speaks out more? What's it like?
Well, I don't think you can say it is one thing or another. It varies so much in football. Obviously, you have bigger personalities, more outspoken people. I was very quiet in the early period of my career and gradually gained confidence in the latter stages of my career. So I think there is sort of a hierarchy within football. With the experienced players, the international players. Yeah. The youngsters will look up to those individuals. Not always, some of them won't. But it was a tough place, a dressing room, but you had to be able to take a joke, you had to take banter, stuff like that. I mean, my early days, I think I was, as I said before, incredibly shy, and mainly because I hadn't reached puberty. I didn't reach it till I was 17. And I'd already been at Leicester. I used to hide in the showers and stuff. But we grew up eventually, and so things came a little bit later in life.
It's a very macho environment, isn't it? So what about talking about feelings? Were people able to do that, or they would have been laughed at? Would they?
You wouldn't do that.
You just wouldn't. You wouldn't.
No, it was a just totally different environment to how it is now, and it's much better now for that, clearly.
Yeah.
But no, you wouldn't. It might be seen, or you'd feel yourself probably that it would be perceived as being a weakness. And I think that even though I can't tell you whether it would have been perceived that way because no one ever did it. Men back then, it was always that the stoic nonsense and just man up, get on with it, stiff upper lip, all that stuff. So I'm glad it's changed, and players now can openly talk about their feelings and their weaknesses, their frailties and their strengths. So I think it's a good thing.
And what about being captain? Were you able to speak up on behalf of the team?
Well, I think that's the biggest part of captaincy. I mean, I never captained a club side, but I captained England in the latter stages of my career. And you're basically a link man between the players and the management and the players and the press. And you become their spokesman. Actually, on the field of play, the captain, it doesn't really mean anything. You toss the coin at the beginning of the game and you lead the team out, but you behave when you're actually playing the game exactly how you did when you weren't the captain. You know, the manager is very much the person who makes all the decisions. The captain makes none. And that, I don't think that's ever changed. So, you know, it was a nice position, but it was more of an off the field role than on the field role.
So, were there any times where you were able to speak up for members of a team that didn't have a voice, or you just couldn't do that?
No, I would have done that. Not for one individual person, but you know that you'd have a little committee of players, and sometimes they might feel something about. With England internationals, it doesn't happen very often. There might be something like, well, we're training tomorrow at 9, and so the boys might go, how come I have a word? So you have a word with the manager and then he says we're still training at 9.
At what point did you know that you were famous?
I think really famous was coming back from the World Cup in 1986 when, as you mentioned in your very kind intro, that I won the Golden Boot.
Yeah.
We got knocked out in the quarterfinals, the Hand of God game. And before that, I'd played at Leicester where people would know me in Leicester. And then I went and played a year at Everton and they would know me up there. And, you know, football fans would have known me. It's not like now where every game's on television, everyone knows every footballer. Yeah. It's totally different. But after they came back from the World Cup, and I had no idea during the World Cup because it was in Mexico. There was, there's no mobile phones then. There was no internet.
Yeah.
There was no, we didn't even see any newspaper. We knew nothing of what was going on back home. But when I got back, it was like the world had changed. I remember driving back up north to Merseyside and stopping at a service station, and I think I was there about half an hour signing autographs and doing bits and bobs and people. It was just, I was like, wow, this is different.
What was that like? Just suddenly everyone wanted to talk to you, and because of who you were. What did that feel like?
Do you know what? It was fine then and it's fine now, because people generally in the street, whenever you meet people, are incredibly courteous and generous and kind. So it was always something that I actually quite enjoyed.
Yeah. I have a memory. You probably won't remember, but I met you a very long time ago in the 80s, right? And we knew each other in the 80s. But the very first time I met you, I was sat next to you at some lunch at Lord's. No, I wasn't a child. At some lunch at Lord's cricket ground. And we were having a great chat, and then after about an hour I said, and anyway, what do you do? And your face was complete shock, first of all, followed by delight that I'd actually been talking to you because I found you interesting, not because you were Gary Lineker, the footballer.
You may have been the first and only person. So that was you, was it?
That was me, yes, that was me. Yes, and I remember distinctly you were so surprised that I didn't know, because I didn't at that time, and then obviously I did get to know through knowing you.
I still get that quite regularly. Because I don't really drive, so I get the train, which is not far from like 200-yard walk from here, and then I get the tube and stuff, and I don't really get bothered that much. People smile and some selfies and stuff, but it's amazing how many times people come up to me and go, because I don't think they imagine that I would be on a tube for some reason. So I get it all the time, and people come up and go, people ever tell you look like Gary Lineker? I went all the time. It happens all the time.
But did you ever imagine that you would become so well known for speaking up?
No, I never thought that. I'm a different animal now than when I was a player as well. I was quite cold and driven when I was a footballer. Nothing. I was like, I literally did stick to football. So I was so concentrated on what I was doing, on trying to score goals, of trying to perform on the pitch, that I don't think I took much notice of affairs outside of football. I had an interest in the world. I had an interest in politics, but I certainly kept quiet.
So would you say that Brexit was the turning point where you first started to court controversy?
No, I don't think so. I think it was the emergence of social media.
Really?
I think it was because where do you have a platform until social media came along? And then that was 2012 when I joined. When I joined Twitter, and I started to quite enjoy it, and it was a place where people, you had discussions, and it was quite sensible in those days.
Yes,
relatively speaking. And so I started voicing my opinion. My first thing wouldn't have been Brexit, it would have been FIFA.
Right.
When I was very strongly outspoken about what was going on with Sepp Blatter and the corruption of FIFA, and because it was my sport, but it was it was kind of political. So that would have been the first time.
And did you start getting pushback already then for things?
No, I never got pushback then, and obviously there was no problem at all about that. I mean, I was the football kind of main football guy for the BBC. So if I can't have an opinion about football matches, then but we could have an opinion on everything. And in those days, of course, the BBC guidelines were only attributable to those that were in news and current affairs. That didn't change till 2020. So so you were perfectly entitled as someone in sport to have an opinion on whatever you like. So so Brexit came along, and I am denied about whether to give my opinion on that or not. But in the end, what I did a lot of homework and investigation of it. I thought, because I remember going through a dinner with like Michael Gove, as a guest of a few people who was trying to convince that Brexit was the right thing. I didn't think he made much sense, and I thought it was just a play for the leadership, and he categorically denied that there are no circumstances that will run for leadership, and 2 weeks after the vote he was running for leadership. So politicians, eh? But in the end I thought, and I just said, I'm going to vote Remain, because I think it's in the best interest of the country, and I really care passionately about this country. And I think obviously since then we've seen the after effects, and I think there's clearly a shift now, but that train has left the station.
Yeah, unfortunately it has, and I think that's the moment when I started getting quite nervous, because families were falling out, friends were falling out, people were so strongly on one side or the other. And then of course there's this now infamous moment where you were taken off the air by the BBC for your tweet comparing Suella Braverman's language on immigration to 1930s Germany. How worried were you by the whole?
I was not worried in the slightest, because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong.
Yeah.
I knew I'd stated facts. I'm fine with the BBC now. It was just a lover's tiff. We've been together a long time. To like 25 years or so. I think. They misread this one. They got it wrong. They obviously accepted that. So it was. I was never. It was a slightly odd experience having people outside my front door, like 20, 30 people all the time.
I'm sure.
I've had that before, but that was way back when my son was ill with leukemia, and that was for different reasons. But this was just it was just odd, because it just seems so totally out of proportion with what was said. It was just a reply to someone that was actually having a pop at me.
Yeah.
And it was just obviously stating a few facts. So it was peculiar.
Was there a moment that you thought you might not be allowed back? Or did you think that would never happen?
No, not at all. I was very, very relaxed throughout the whole thing, genuinely so. I was moved as well by the response. I didn't expect that.
And then the BBC updated its social media guidelines to include a strengthened Lineker clause.
I don't think it's turned a Lineker clause.
Has that censored you at all?
No, it's actually it's much more generous than it was before when the 2020 rules were kind of brought in, but obviously they're only guidelines. I think that's what we have to remember. They're just how the guides to what we should get involved in, and I've always tried to be sensible anyway. Hence this was the only time really there was any major concern.
Yeah.
So obviously I was part of the process for the new guidelines as well. But now it gives people outside news, current affairs, the right again to have a view on things.
But has it made you a bit more careful?
No, what's made me more careful is the fact I don't really enjoy Twitter anymore.
Right. Okay.
Because it's become a very different place than it was before. It changed.
Did you imagine the backlash that you received when you retweeted a tweet calling for Israel to be banned from the international sports events?
Retweets are retweets, they're not endorsements. Yeah. I kind of took no notice of that.
But you deleted it and then got panned by both sides.
I deleted it because people misunderstood the fact that at the same time, I know where I stand on what's going on.
But this is exactly one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast was for that kind of thing that happened to you. That there are certain subjects, and now it's Gaza, where you are going to be panned by one side or the other.
Well, I think that's where we are as a nation, sadly, at the moment. I think we've been pushed down an avenue where everything is a bit to divide us, and it's culture war politics, and I think it's really sad, because I think, you know, most of us care for the same things about our country, and, you know, we can have opinions on things, and I think it's, you know, it's hard not to have an opinion on things in other countries, which you know, you can say that that's a political thing, but it's, you know, no one bothered when you could tweet whatever you liked about what happened in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But then people say you shouldn't have a view about what's happening in Israel and Gaza.
Yeah.
So, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because they're totally different issues from our. It's not like you're having to go at the Tories or the Labour Party, which is obviously where you have to be very balanced, and I always have been. No one knows who I've ever voted for. I've never told, you know, never publicly. So, but something like, you know, obviously it was dreadful what happened on the October the 7th, but what's happened subsequently is beyond the pale. Yeah. And it's just so upsetting to see, you know, children losing their lives. I find it very difficult, and I couldn't live with myself if I was quiet about that.
But this is the problem, that I think certain subjects have made it impossible for those who don't have the courage to actually speak at all.
I totally understand if people haven't got the courage to do it, because you know, they're you know, the vitriol. And the vituperosity that you can get, particularly online, is tough for a lot of people, and I totally respect the fact that they don't want to dip their toe in that water, because it's, you know, you've got to be fairly strong mentally. I have a thing, I post whatever I post, and I never look at any replies anyway. I used to, because Twitter used to be a different thing, which brings me to the point why I don't really, and people would have noted that I don't, and it's nothing to do with BBC or anything like that. Right. It's down to the fact that it's not fun anymore. You used to be able to have conversations and chats with people. You can't do that now, because you used to be able to differentiate the two lists from all the replies that you get. Yeah. And then the ones from blue tick holders or people that you follow. Yeah. So you get notifications of that. But now, because you can just buy a blue tick, everyone has them. So you can't. So all you get is like, you know, you get a mixture, but what it's done, it's ruined the experience for the kind people, because most trolls, you never see them in daily life. You never get anyone to anything like that in your daily goings on. But on there, you can get that. So I just don't. It's kind of switched off. I'll still tweet my stuff, and I'll try and promote my, you know, Rest is Football podcast and this podcast perhaps when it comes out. So for that kind of thing, and my, you know, BBC shows and all that sort of stuff. But it's kind of pointless getting involved in anything else now. Really.
But there are lots of people I've spoken to who, after they've received not nearly as much as you, have totally just come off it because it's just too much. What keeps you going?
I'm secure, I think. I think it's important. I wouldn't do it if I didn't think they were important things.
You're not frightened?
Frightened of words? No.
No, not words. No. But I mean, you know, you've received threats. I don't know.
Well, I have, but I take them with a pinch of salt, to be honest. I've been around a long time now, so I've never had a physical threat in my life out in the streets. Right. I've had plenty on social media. Right. But you know damn well that it's nothing. Maybe I'll be wrong and I might be shot dead tomorrow afternoon, but if I am, make it quick and be an accurate shot, please. I don't know.
God, I hope not. So it's really because you feel so strongly, I think, that as you said, you just can't not say something about things you feel that strongly about.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's very important to say that in terms of, because of the guideline thing and all that, it's very important to say what I tweet about and what I've always done. They're humanitarian issues, not political issues.
Yes.
Although obviously these things always overlap. They can't, but on humanitarian issues, they're perfectly allowed.
And so what's your response to people, I think I probably know, including Conservative MPs who say you should stop meddling in these areas and stick to focusing on football?
Well, I don't really think, they deserve too much time of day, that kind of comment, because that, does that mean a plumber can only talk about plumbing, an electrician can only talk about electrics? It's the only time you hear that from people when they want you just to stick to a certain subject is because they disagree with what you say. They don't like what you say.
Yeah.
If I said something that they concurred with, that they absolutely were on board with, they'd be absolutely delighted in me having an opinion away from football. So I don't think any of us that get that kind of nonsense take any notice of it.
Can you see yourself ever going into politics?
No.
Really?
No. No, I'm interested in politics, but I've had no interest in going into politics. I think it's even more thankless task than perhaps being a football manager.
I think so, yeah. And do you ever feel nervous?
No.
You don't?
No, it's a strange thing, and I think it's a really important thing for a goal scorer. I think it's part of it. You almost have to be ice cold in terms of your nerves, because you can't function if you're a nervous wreck in front of goal. You've got to be very strong mentally. You've got to be prepared to miss and make mistakes.
I don't know how you do those penalty shootouts.
Well, that's my point. Even with the penalties in the World Cup, I didn't feel nervous. I felt like quite excited.
Really?
And it felt, and it sounds a bit boastful, but it felt like a chance to show off the fact that you were in a position that like hardly anyone ever gets in, and you can show that you've got a bit of bottle. So I kind of like those circumstances. I know it sounds a bit weird and probably unusual, but I mean, I'm a striker. What better chance is there to score a goal than be 12 yards out with a keeper that can't leave his goal line? So
how do you learn?
Still miss them though.
How do you learn that? I would love to know.
I don't think you do.
So it's just something you're born with?
It's part of you, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That ability?
I think so, because I think it's quite unusual. I remember the first TV show I did when I presented, because I'd never done any, and it was BBC highlight show for the Euros in '96, and I did feel like butterflies a little bit, and I honestly say, wow, this is a weird feeling.
Yeah.
What is this? And after that, I didn't really have it again. So, I mean, I can get, that nervous, I get nervous energy and excitement, but not like that butterfly thing. That was the only time I have to compare it with, because that's the only time I really experienced it.
That is quite amazing.
Yeah. It is odd, I think.
But you do feel the emotions, Gary. Do you?
Oh, emotions of the passion and the winning and the glory, or the despair of losing, or something like that. Absolutely, that's different.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about that thing where you actually are a bit scared of something.
Yeah.
Not really, no.
So what changed? You said you're a different person to the person you were when you first started playing football. Do you think it's having kids that really changes you?
I think it would be a lot of things. I think you grow, you mature. I read more. I had children. Well, Michelle had children. And we had 4 boys that were 5 and under. That was hard work. And then obviously the oldest, before any of the others were born, was seriously ill, and I think that probably made a difference. But there's not one given moment or anything like that. It's just, I think you just gradually change as you get older. And even from 10 years ago, I think we do differ. And some people will go one way and some people go the other. I think my kind of social conscience is greater than it was, and it seems to get more as I kind of slide into old age.
And do you encourage your children to speak up?
I let them get on with their lives, but so I don't push them to do one thing or the other.
Do you think it's actually hard for them having you as a dad?
I think there are pros and cons.
Yeah.
They obviously particularly George, probably because he's the eldest, and he was a massive story when he was a baby, when he had leukemia. I think even though he's no memory of it, but people's reactions to him are probably different because of that. So I've had this conversation with them, and they said, "Nah, it's all fine, it's great." So I mean, they are. I think it's an advantageous thing to have that in life in many ways. But obviously there will be, they might get a bit of stick on social media, but they're all pretty made of stone stuff. They're all, they'll do fine.
Yeah.
They're all right.
Do you feel that having a profile means you have a feeling of responsibility to speak up on behalf of those who maybe don't have the voice that you have?
I don't feel I have a responsibility, but I do feel I have a motivation for whatever reason. I think it's about right and wrong. And if I see something that's wrong, then sometimes I'll get upset when I wouldn't get upset like 30 years ago. So I think that's the change. I don't think anyone has a responsibility to speak up because it's not an easy thing to do. But if they want to, then I would absolutely encourage them to do that.
And apart from talking on social media and stuff, do you ever go and give talks or?
I know I get a little bit of stick on the social media for lecturing, but that's the one thing I actually always avoid doing. I never tell people what I think they should do.
No.
I might tell people what I would do or what I think I should do, but I don't tell people what to do because I wouldn't like to be considered like pompous.
But I don't just mean what to do, but do you would you go and give a talk somewhere?
I don't really. It's not. I don't really enjoy that kind of thing. No. I mean, I have done. Obviously, I've done a few things, charities and stuff over the years. Lots of those sort of things. Yeah. But actually, kind of standing there, public speaking, it's I don't like huge amounts of people. It's fine when they're at a football ground and I'm just getting on with my own thing, but I don't really enjoy the big events and stuff.
Yeah, I can understand that. And have you ever been inspired by seeing someone else speak up and being brave?
Oh, I think lots of times. Yeah, I think lots of people are very good. Even in football, take Marcus Rashford for example. Yeah. I mean, what he did, that takes a lot of courage. That's not easy, particularly as a young man. To stand up against the government scheme and get about feeding our kids at schools, and he turned government policy, and I think that was extraordinary. Jordan Henderson, when he was with the captains during the pandemic, Raheem Sterling, and numerous others on racism. So even in my own sport, in fact, I've become very proud about young footballers for having the courage to do that. At the same time, the ones that don't, I respect that as well, because but I think it's brilliant when they do, and it's not easy when you put your head above the parapet, because the first time your form dips, everyone wants to have a go at you and say that's because he's not concentrating on football, which is a nonsense. But there's also a degree of inevitability about that.
Have you ever given them some advice about how to deal with it all?
No one's ever asked me. I think they all go, he's the last person to ask him. Gets himself in the right load of trouble at times. What am I asking for?
But finally, can I ask you, Gary? I mean, this podcast is also not because I'm just fascinated by the subject, which I am, but also I'm hoping that anyone who listens to this can be inspired by the people they hear to have their own courage to speak up on certain issues, because I'm getting concerned that we're living in a world where it's more likely that people are going to shut up for fear of the repercussions. Yeah. So I'd love to know what advice you might give someone who is afraid of speaking up.
I think it's quite difficult to tell people what to do if they're afraid and they don't have that courage. I wouldn't want to force them to do it. If you're thinking about doing it, if you're just thinking about doing it and you're considering it, then I would encourage you to have a go. Be careful and cautious with your words, as always. I think you're absolutely right. We're living in times where we're encouraged not to speak out, keeping us quiet. Demonstrations now have been, stamped out, civil ones as well. We've seen what's happened with, people demonstrating against climate change, for example, thrown in jail for crying out loud. we do live in worrying times in that way, culture wars, divisiveness. But obviously the more people that can speak out against that, we are still a democracy, so the more people that have the courage of the convictions, the better.
Gary, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to The Courage to Speak, presented by me, Leonie Mellinger. The Courage to Speak is produced by Anushka Warden, with sound production by Theo Bosenket and music by Guy Pearson. For more information on The Courage to Speak, visit www.mellinger.co.uk.